Welcome to the Good Going Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today. We are maybe winding up some of our fall garden tasks. We've done a couple of these episodes these last few weeks about what to do in the fall garden, some of the common tasks, putting the garden or the landscapes to bed, and now let's talk about taking care of our tools that we have been using all summer long. And you know, I'm not doing this by myself. I am joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. It's time to put the tools to bed, too.
Oh, never. The tools are always in use in my yard. But yes, I actually, it would be nice to kind of get them up and out of the way so I can use my garage again.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly of my own doing, but yes.
Yep. I have enough tools that I reach for often enough that it's not worth putting them up kind of out of the way throughout the growing season. So they sort of sit. I have a wheelbarrow. A lot of them will sit in the wheelbarrow that I really use very frequently. And then again, the kids, they get stuff out all the time, even though I tell them not to. It still happens. Yeah. Why is the leaf blower sitting in the yard all weekend? I don't know. Didn't even know it was out there, but it was. So anyway, oh, Ken. So I guess we're going to discuss our common tips, techniques that we kind of clean our tools up for the fall after a long growing season.
Or we should be doing, in my case.
Do as we say. Yes, maybe not always as we do. Well, I suppose we'll start this is probably the tool that I use the most, and that is the shovel. I have a favorite shovel. Do you have a favorite shovel?
It's not this one, but
Not that one. All right, you have a
it's my
tiny
prop.
shovel.
Yes, it's one we got for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not the most practical, at least for me. It's a little short
Not for a full-grown human. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I guess if I want to shovel on my knees, it would be
Yeah.
work, but
Yeah. Well, I do wind up. So that was the one thing that I found was that sometimes when it comes to leverage and using that shovel, getting down on my knees was sometimes easier, kind of depending on the task. Like, so if I'm cutting an edge on a landscape bed, or, you know, it's just something where you don't want to have to be bending over for like an hour. A lot of times I would get down on my knees and just let my back take most of the brunt of it. So instead of my legs doing a lot of the work, which I think is the opposite of what is usually recommended. But
so maybe you're beyond those days now.
yeah, I got to lift with my legs more now. So Ken, I reach for my shovel more often, and I didn't bring any fun props today, but I will try to pop a picture of my shovel here. It is actually a kind of a shorter shovel. It's got a handle on the end. But the reason why I love it is it's kind of heavy, which makes it really nice for chopping stuff. And the other thing that makes it nice for chopping stuff, it is very sharp. It's got a good sharp edge to that. So I guess you have the tiny shovel, but your shovel that you normally reach for, does it have a sharp edge to it?
Yeah, kind of. I need to put a new one on there, but it has had one in the past. We'll put it that way,
Okay.
or at least an edge to it.
Mm-hmm. And I guess when you're using the shovel, kind of day in, day out, I think I said on the last show, it is kind of a habit of mine that when I'm done, at least with the shovel, my special shovel, let's maybe be more specific, that I do scrape off all the dirt. I wipe it down with a old burlap potato sack just to make sure that all of that soil is off there. Because even when soil can dry, there's still it's a little bit of water, a little bit of moisture in that soil, and where it's stuck to that shovel blade, it can oxidize and rust. And where that happens, you start to get little degradation of that metal. It weakens it. So you compound that over time in a lot of our tools, I think we use, maybe even passed down from generations. Um, we want to try to preserve that metal as long as possible. Um, so that's what I do, is I make sure that it's very clean. I don't necessarily oil the blade or anything. Do you do anything different, Ken, when you're putting your shovel up after a hard day's work?
It usually doesn't get cleaned very well. It, it gets knocked off. Yeah, it gets knocked off and put away. There's still usually some left on. They're usually in the fall is when I try to do a good cleanup, which doesn't always happen. But and then a lot of times try to keep it off the cement, because especially when we get into the winter, that cold, the temperature difference can cause moisture and stuff to condense and stuff, and just try to keep that metal off the cement and stuff.
Yeah. You can have a nice rust stain where that shovel was sitting all winter long on your garage floor.
Yeah. So this shovel is one we got for our kids, and it's been left outside for extended periods of time. So there's lots of rust on here. So this fall, what I need to do is what I'll do is get a wire brush, knock all that soil and stuff off. Then you can use like sandpaper, steel wool, something like that to get the rust off. And then I'll take a file.
Mhm.
Right, so you can get single cut, which is just one groove on there, double cut, which is you get like a X pattern on there, and then I'll take off more material than a single cut if you haven't done it. And just basically to sharpen it, you just kind of run the file over the edge. Well, that's showing up on the
Mhm.
video. Um, but just kind of run that over. You do it in one direction, um, out. You go back and forth. You're just taking the metal off. You're not actually going to form an edge there. I mean, if you've never done before, it's probably going to take some time because shovels typically don't come quote
Yeah.
unquote sharpened. Um, so it'll take some time the first time, and then subsequent years not as much. And you're not getting this like a knife. If you were to get it that sharp, that blade's going to be pretty thin, and that's going to get nicked and dented pretty quickly. But
Mhm.
a little sharpness on there, and that just have that lesser surface area that will go through the soil a lot easier. And you can do that. You can really do that any time of year, but now that we're probably going to be done digging a lot of stuff, especially when the ground freezes. Fall, winter is a good time to get all that ready, so you don't have to worry about doing it in the spring.
Yeah. And I think that's so my shovel, which is really, I got it from a landscaper. They're closing down and they were selling their hand tools. And I saw this again, the shovel. It's solid metal. It's very heavy, as I said. And it's essentially like, I think it is a metal pole welded to like a spade, kind of like a square head. And it was sharpened very, very much to a knife point. And so I think to what you said, Ken, how we don't really want to have such a sharp edge. You'll see, if I pop a picture up here, you'll see that edge of the shovel is really irregular. I think that's where it broke, because it was just sharpened too much. It was too sharp. Um, and so you still need to have some beef to that shovel so that it will, you know, not snap in half when you use it to pry on stuff. So yeah, that's the one thing that I will take a file to my shovels, but I will not. I'm not as detailed as say when we talk about later when we talk about mower blades and things like that, or even our pruners. So shovels, it's a very quick, you know, kind of file thing. I'm not paying too close attention. You're just kind of looking at making sure that you're not, I'm not just filing and just, you know, losing any type of bevel to the end of that blade. So, yeah, I do clean them. I don't sharpen them probably as I should.
Yeah, and then with the shovel, if you're going to be sharpening it, you just need to do at the point you don't have to worry about the sides. You're not going to be cutting
Hmm.
that. Just if it's spade here, just the rounded parts of it, right, the tip
Hmm.
and down a little bit. And then, I mean, if you haven't done it, you could use something like a grinding wheel angle grinder. That'll take off more, it'll be a little quicker, but you don't want to do it to the point where that metal starts glowing or heating up too much, because then you lose the temper on the metal. That metal becomes softer and stuff. So if
Mhm.
you're going to be doing it not by hand, just make sure you're not take some breaks so that metal doesn't heat up too much and cause you problems.
Yeah. And I guess maybe we should talk about some PPE as we are working with sharp things and grinding wheels and things like that. Um, whenever I sharpen, I've learned the hard way. I wear leather gloves because I have been running a file on a blade before, on a mower blade, and I cut my knuckle pretty severely as I was moving over that blade. So wear your gloves and wear safety glasses because those metal filings can fly up in the air. Or if you're using a grinding wheel, sparks, things like that. Also, other metal filings can still fly in the air. So protect your eyes, protect your hands, and just yeah. If you the other thing, we'll probably say this multiple times. If you're not comfortable doing this, you can pay someone to do it.
So I will gladly take your money.
Yes, they will. And sometimes maybe it would be cheaper to pay someone to do it than to buy all the equipment or something to do it yourself.
Yeah, if you've only got one or two things to do and you don't do it every year,
hmm
maybe cheaper in the long run to pay somebody to do it.
Yeah. So what another tool that I also do take my file to is our cultivator. It's called a collinear hoe, and it's this rectangular blade at the end of a long wooden pole. And I use that to cultivate or essentially cut little baby weed seedlings as they're just starting to germinate. Now, this collinear hoe head, this blade to it, is another one of those that could probably benefit to having a little bit of a sharper edge. There, Ken's got it, a good example of one in his hand there. Um, I think these could probably have a much sharper edge than your shovel because you're not using this to pry, you're not using this to dig. This is literally just slicing into that top like 16th to 8th inch of soil. You're just sliding that along, cutting off those weed seeds or popping them out of the ground, weed seedlings, popping them out of the ground to try to dry their roots out so they die. So that's actually one. When you see the chefs sharpening their chef knife, even as they're cutting, I see farmers who regularly cultivate, they'll have a file in their back pocket and they'll do a couple rows and then they'll take their file, they'll get it out and they'll sharpen it up, or at least, get it, hone it a little bit, like I guess a chef hones their knife, and then cultivate a few more rows and keep going down. So that is one that I do sharpen a little bit more carefully as opposed to the shovel.
And we'll probably talk more about this with pruners and mower blades, but that bevel on there when you're sharpening, make sure you're following.
Mhm.
You probably can't see well on here. You can see there's a little bit of a bevel. So if you're taking your file, making sure you're at that same angle when you're sharpening and not resetting that bevel and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, like a couple test passes even help. You take a few passes, pause, look, make sure you've angled that file just right because you don't want to have to. Because if you kind of angle it a little bit too much into the blade, you have to start all over and create a whole new blade, like a new edge to that. So it's going to be a lot more work for you.
Yeah, I do that. So I did that with the collinear hoe. I've done that a few times. So I've noticed it's not cutting as well. Stirrup hoe,
hmm
scuffle hoe, whatever you want to call it. Same thing, or even a regular hoe.
hmm
And basically anything you're going to be cutting or chopping with,
Yeah.
you'll could benefit from being sharp and make your life a little bit easier, a little less effort required if it's
Yeah.
sharp.
Again, we're not shaving with these. We don't have to shave our face or shave our legs with these. We're we're cutting weed sealing, so they need to be sharp, but not like a razor. Still need to have a little bit of kind of meat to that blade so that it can do its job.
Another thing for hand tools and something I haven't really done but I need to do, like wooden handles.
hmm
So if like this one, Again, this has been left outside, and this one looks like it was varnished. And I know a lot of people, if they have varnished hand tools, as soon as they get it, they'll sand that off and oil it because that varnish will chip and stuff. And that's what's happening here. I've got another tool, but the collinear hoe, it's one that you can attach different heads and stuff to. That was pretty rough when I got it. When I got it during the garden season, so I started using it. So that needs to be sanded down, get rid of those rough spots, and then probably use like a boiled linseed oil or something on that. That oil will the wood will absorb that and help kind of keep that from drying out and getting
Hmm.
brittle and cracking or splintering and stuff like that. So cleaning up the wooden handles and then if they're rough, sanding them down and treating them with oil. And you can put that oil on there anytime during the year.
Yeah, that's my process for preserving those wooden handles. I have had instances where the kids have left them outside. Those wooden handles doesn't take long for them to start to degrade when exposed to the elements like that. So yeah, I was sanding them down really well, and then this has actually happened to me actually during 2020 during COVID when there was all kinds of you couldn't find anything anywhere. But I did have a cutting board, mineral spirits, and so I rescued my collinear hoe wooden handle with some sandpaper and some cutting board mineral spirits. I was able to sand out some of the kind of that not nasty splintered wood that had absorbed a lot of water, sanded that down, and then oiled it up. And then, yeah, as Ken said, kind of, I just have a like a rag, and you can just kind of polish it, oil the handle anytime. So,
No,
mm,
I'll say with like linseed oil, my understanding is, that rag, that linseed oil on the rag can oxidize and can spontaneously combust. So making sure read the label on that container and don't, usually you would lay that out, let it evaporate or put it in a metal can with a lid so it doesn't,
mm.
so reduce that chance of it spontaneous combusting in your garage or something like that. So again, read the labels when you're using it and take those precautions if you need to.
Yes, yes. Every time I've read something about linseed oil, it's always said wear gloves. They can stain your hands. They can make your hands smell. So, yeah, wear gloves when you're using linseed oil, um, and yeah. So I think that's usually what I've turned to is some kind of a. Well, I guess I'm using mineral oil, like a food grade kind of oil. Um, there's also motor oil. Now, this is sort of like an old, not old. Like I'm pretty sure my parents use this technique. You drain the oil from the car or whatever. Well, what do you do with that? Well, you put that in a bucket of sand, and then you can dip your tools in it to lubricate them. And so I don't do that. um, but I know that is still a common practice these days.
Yeah, I've also read people just buying cheap motor oil, putting it in
Hmm.
sand, and then putting your metal tools in there and store them in there for that rust prevention. But I don't know. For me, I'm sure it does a good job of preventing rust. But then when you're using that, do you really want to be introducing that oil? You're probably not putting tremendous amounts in, but you're still, I guess, maybe well, for me, I wouldn't use it in a vegetable garden if I'm going to be digging in there. But I don't know. That's just me. I'd be hesitant to use motor oil. But that like
With
that
my,
linseed oil you could use that comes from flax.
mhm,
You just wipe that on the metal parts too.
mhm. Yeah, use it to style your hair, whatever you need. Yeah, I think with my luck using motor oil, I'd like get it all over the place, and then I'd like my hands would be all greasy and slimy, and I'd be like digging a hole and I'd hurt myself or something. I just know that would happen with my luck, so I try to avoid hurting myself or putting myself in that predicament when I can.
And the kids are knocking over and walk in it and bring it inside.
Hmm. Oh, nice new carpet. What are those black footprints all over it? Oh, yeah, it's the motor oil you dip your tools in. Yeah, no, best to avoid those situations. Well, there's one more kind of lubricant I think that can be used, or again, I've not used it, but I do see this as a recommendation at times. It's like a silicone type penetrant. Um, Probably you might use this on bicycle chains, or maybe the chain to your garage door. And so I think there's some brand names out there, 3-to-1. Is it WD-40? Is that also would be considered one of those? And
Yeah, some of the different formulations.
yeah, yeah, the brand names, there's lots of different types of these. So, yeah, I would say it's one of those again need to read those directions to see if what they can be used on. Um, I really think for the most part, because well, we're talking about hand tools. We touch these with our hands all the time. It wants to be, you want to pick something that you feel comfortable contacting your skin routinely. And, if you're a very active gardener, you're going to be either applying this or using that tool a lot.
Printer time.
Oh, time for the pruners. Bring in the pruners, everybody. Well, Ken, I think aside from the shovel, I use the shovel all the time. Actually, I had to use the shovel just yesterday. I had I had some lavender. Someone gave me some lavender, and I had kept it alive in a pot all summer long. And I decided I'm going to plant this in the ground for some reason so I can watch it die over the winter. Um, so I planted some lavender yesterday. Um, but probably the other tool, which I use almost as much as a shovel, is a hand pruner. How would you rank your hand pruner usage?
Um, it's definitely below my hand trowel. Hand trowel is number one.
Is that number? Well, you have the
I got my
this it's like a weapon hand trowel. Um that's something I would not want to be caught alone with you in like an elevator, an alley somewhere,
the
and be
crocodile
worried you're
Dundee.
gonna, man, whoo, that thing's dangerous. It's gnarly. Yeah, so he has like a hand trowel. I call it a soil
Well,
knife.
hori hori.
Hori hori, yeah. It's got a serrated edge on one side, very sharp, and then a straight sharp edge on the other side. It's got a point right there. It's got a bottle opener on one side.
So it's also kind of sharpened on the inside, so you can cut string
You
and
can
stuff
cut
with it,
cut string and
or
things. Yeah.
or use it as a bottle opener.
Well, you know what I've been using it for. Um, and a nice wooden handle. So it is a very nice tool. That would be another one I'd say might want to wear leather gloves or something when handling that thing. But yeah, I think you have a couple scars on your hands from that tool,
I
don't
have
you?
drawn. I don't wear gloves usually, and yes, I have drawn blood.
Hmm. Yes. So cutting things besides ourselves, hand pruners. Um, I don't shear stuff. I don't use, shears. I do own a pair of like battery operated shears. The only thing I've ever sheared though have been Canadian goldenrod and poison hemlock. So I've never sheared a shrub, and I use hand pruners almost exclusively. It's because I'm a pruning snob, though. So I just like doing that better. I think plants look better when they're pruned by hand. Um, but we have our brands that we like, or at least that we were indoctrinated into when we first started in the world of landscaping. So they have nice red handle, and uh, it rhymes with Wilco. Um, the band. Uh, so yeah, I think when it comes to pruners, you really have two options here. You can buy a cheap pair of pruners, and when they wear out, you just throw them away. You don't have to try to sharpen them. You don't have to try to oil them. Yes, Ken has like these needle nose. Do you use that to trim your nose hair? That's
Like herbs or something like that,
yes,
or
like little
seedlings.
delicate things.
Yeah, for seedlings
Hmm.
and stuff. Yeah,
But when that wears out, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to try to fix it or sharpen it, or what would you try to save it, or would you just throw it away?
it's getting to the point it needs to be sharpened. Because I'm cheap, I'll probably try to sharpen it, but
Okay.
I'd probably be better served just getting another pair,
Just get another pair.
a nice
Yeah.
pair.
So I guess, and the other side of the coin, if you want to buy a high quality pruning tool, is instead of throwing away, you want to hold on to that puppy and take care of it, sharpen it, clean it, oil it up every single year, if not multiple times a year. Um, and so that is the two options I think that lay before us is you either buy a cheap tool, toss it when you're done with it, when it wears out, or take care of it. Um, and so I guess Ken, could you walk us through the process of like how would we take care of a fancy pruners like what you have in your hand, that old red handled brand?
So your fancy ones are some of your more expensive ones. They can be taken apart, so you can actually take the blade off, sharpen that, or buy a new blade if you needed to. And mine's getting a little. I probably don't use mine as much as you. Basically, most of my pruning is done in the spring. Clean up dead stuff, and then I don't do a whole lot of pruning, even though I probably should.
Hmm.
I just leave things to their own devices. But with the ones that you can take apart, you can take that blade out and get like a whetstone or something like that, and sharpen on there again. You're doing a stroke, and usually I should have brought my whetstone to say this book is the whetstone, and this is my blade. You're just gonna curve it with that because that the cutting blade is gonna be curved, and you just kind of draw your blade across that stone. Again, you want to follow that bevel. They're what usually 10-20 degree bevel. So
Hmm.
you kind of typically what you do, you kind of rock that on there till you get that bevel and then run that across the blade or the stone. You probably what 10-20 passes,
Hmm.
depending on how dull it is. But if you're keeping up with it, you don't have to do a tremendous amount of sharpening on it. Stuff. If it's one that you can't take apart, like these cheaper ones, you can get, I don't know about necessarily a file, but you can get like a diamond file on there and sharpen those. It's all basically like a metal file. It's just got diamond on there that'll sharpen that and stuff too. Again, following the bevel and stuff. I think the advantage of being able to take it apart is you can clean it a lot better, get into all the cracks and crevices, and you got a little more control over that
Hmm.
sharpening sometimes too.
Yeah. You get a lot of sap, there's a lot of stuff that like just accumulates in the nooks and crannies of a hand pruner over the year. Uh, I, so my wife, she went to dental hygiene school. She's a dental hygienist. But when they go to school, they have to buy their own instruments, their own metal instruments, the things that they use to scrape on your teeth. Um, and but they have to sharpen them themselves too. It's very hard metal. And the metal in our hand pruner is also very hard metal, like a very strong tool steel. So she has this rectangular sharpening stone, which I borrow to sharpen my pruners. And thankfully, she doesn't have to sharpen her instruments anymore. So it's pretty much my own little sharpening stone. Yeah, you don't want to overdo it necessarily. 20 to 30 passes would be plenty. Um, you then want to flip your blade over and inspect kind of that, not the beveled edge, but the other edge, and make sure there's no burrs or anything like that. If there are any burrs or anything you see like sticking up, you just kind of very flat, you just take your sharpening stone and just sort of, you know, make sure that you get any of those, anything that might be hanging off that edge or burr or something like that on that flat edge of the blade. And because the other thing with these pruners is that they're bypass. So they have to, there's the anvil and it bypasses the blade like this. So it's got to be nice and smooth of motion or action for that. You want to make sure that there's nothing interfering with that, which could then dull your pruner blade the more you use it.
Yeah, and there's jigs out there that you can put your blade in and run it across, so you got that consistent stroke. And
Hmm.
so depending on how much money you want to spend on that stuff. So
Yeah. The thing I wish I had was like a bench clamp, something on a workbench that I could use to clamp down. I don't own one. Um, it would probably be really useful to have one when doing some of these tasks. Very often, I'm just using some type of regular old C clamp or something to clamp some of these things down to the table so they don't move. Again, more for like safety, so you don't cut yourself. To kind of make the process or action a little bit smoother. But yeah, clamps, another thing that you might want to invest in if you're gonna start doing this.
should make some how-to videos this winter. instead of just using our hands.
For all you listening, you're like, I don't know what the heck they're talking about. you're, you're just like, this is the weirdest one. And then all of you watching are like, they're just using their hands. They're not even showing us anything. Yeah, sorry. Sorry. We're good at our jobs, promise. Oh. I guess, yeah. One other thing on the hand pruners, make sure that they oil them, lubricate them some way. I'm pretty good with my hand pruners. I always forget to do that with my loppers, and every spring I'll get my loppers and I'll be like, can't, I can't open them. I can't use them, and so I got to take them apart, clean some of the rust that's accumulated in that little bolt there that holds the two handles together. And yeah, I should have oiled them up that fall, so that didn't happen. But I always forget.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever sharpened my loppers.
Oh
They're
yeah,
the ones that
I
got the extendable handle, so I just extend it so I can get as much leverage as I can.
there you go. More power. There you
Brute
go.
force it.
Yeah, I don't I do have a pair of loppers that was actually my wife Amy's. That was her grandfather's loppers, an old wooden handle. Um, that is one that I do take a little bit better care of. It's actually very sharp. It cuts really well, and I've never had to sharpen it. It's a very nice one. Brand new set of loppers that I got just a few years ago. Already very difficult to use anymore. Very dull. Yeah, I am. I'm like squeezing it in my armpit to try to get as much force as I can out of that one. So while I try to avoid using Amy's grandfather's loppers, they are much nicer.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Mhm. Well, I, speaking of cutting things with much force and labor, let's talk about our mowers. Um, I think that this will ring true once again that when you are working underneath of a mower, whether it's a push mower or a riding mower, um, if you're not comfortable doing this, call someone to do this for you. Very often, I recommend people do like a fall maintenance on their mower. Um, and this would probably include blade sharpening if you would have a business come out and do this for you. They would also probably check your oil, change your oil, spark plugs, filters, all of that kind of stuff. So you can pay someone to do this, and if you're more comfortable doing that, I say do that. It is, especially if you're busy, it takes a lot off your plate to not have to worry about something like that or have to fit that in on a busy weekend. But Ken, are you a DIY guy?
For mowers, no, we have somebody come get it. They
Okay.
come pick up. We have a riding mower. Well, for the riding mower, no, I don't do any of that. They
Hmm.
pick it up, return it. We did that. Actually, did that this summer. So we weren't cutting the grass, and it had been a couple of years.
Hmm.
Sent in, sharpen the blades, oil change, all of that fun stuff. We do have a push mower, electric push mower, that I will occasionally sharpen the blades on. Not nearly as often as I should, but I will
Hmm.
I will sharpen those.
I I am unfortunately the DIY guy when it comes to the mower. I I have a hard time calling someone for this thing, namely because there's no one in town. We had two small engine repair businesses here in Macomb. They have both closed down these last 2 years here, so you're kind of on your own unless you have like a particular brand of mower and that dealer is nearby. So what what I have gone to is a lot of these brands. You can now go online and you can order a maintenance kit, and that will come with everything you need for sort of just like an annual maintenance, changing the air filter, changing the fuel filter, changing your oil filter. So your filters are taken care of. It sends you new spark plugs, and it gives you a couple bottles of oil to swap out the oil. And so that's something that I handle that now. Um, for better or for worse, my mower, we'll see how long it runs. I don't know. I'm not a mechanic or mechanically inclined in any way, but um, you know, they give instructions, and there's YouTube. There's some good videos on that stuff too. So yeah, depending on your brand, you might be able to just get a maintenance kit if you're like me and you don't have any small engine repair anymore next to you.
Yeah. So then on top of the the oil change and the engine maintenance stuff, um, it's probably looking maybe have one more mowing, but I don't think we're gonna mow much our yard much more.
Mhm.
We may mow once more just so I can put some fuel stabilizer, fill
Yeah.
it up again with fuel. It's got fuel stabilizer in it and let that run through, and we'll pretend to cut the grass, even though it probably won't cut much. Um, but and then when we're done with that, um, sharpen blades, especially with our electric mower, because that one I can just tip over. I don't have to worry about gas or oil or anything
Mhm.
leaking out. And for that one, we've actually got piece that fits on a drill. That's just sharpening stone. You can just run that over that
Mhm.
a few times. For that one, we've had that mower for 10 years now. So the blades are, and I'm not good about picking up sticks. My kids aren't good about picking up sticks. So it's got a lot of chunks missing out of the blades. It's probably time to put a new blade on there, but we'll just run through that. And we don't use that mower as much anymore. But use the drill thing, sharpen it, and call it a day.
Mhm. Yeah, I think this is a good point to like tell people to inspect their blades as well. So if you do have, especially, if you're seeing cracks forming, um, not only kind of across the blade, but even down the length of the blade, that means that that metal is essentially failing. And those blades are spinning pretty fast underneath your butt or your feet, however, whether it's a push mower or a riding mower. Um, and I would not want to have a blade that's on the brink of failure spinning that fast near my body. So inspect your blades. Again, if you're seeing cracks, lengthwise or across the blade, it means it's time to replace it and get rid of it. Um, but I have a push mower, an old Toro push mower that I know how to take apart frontwards and backwards. I've had it since I was in junior high school, and that thing is it is a delight to take the blades off and sharpen those. Meanwhile, the riding mower is a monster to take the blades off and sharpen those things. So yeah, I feel you. So I have the same thing. I have a kit that came with the little kind of grinding stone. I put that in my drill and sharpen it like that. I might do some passes with the file, and then a lot of times those kits will also have this little cone, and this cone, your blade will sit on that, and it will balance or not balance. And if it's not balanced, you want to try to make sure one, clean off any of that debris or stuff that might make it unbalanced, or you'll just have to keep taking metal off so that it's balanced, because the one thing you don't want is you don't want a blade that's heavier on one side, because as it's spinning, it's putting that force on that on the thing that the blade is mounted to, whatever that thing is called, post. It's putting that force on that, and it's uneven, and it's shaking it, and so it's not good long term to have an unbalanced mower blade. And I've even will take my balance after I've had my blade sharpen at like a sharpening place. I will still double check it just to make sure. I think when it comes to sharpening our mower blades, what we've discussed as far as like pruners or even shovels, kind of the same. Follow that bevel, and then flip over the blade, check for any burrs or anything sticking out the other side. Um, and yeah, just do the same. Um, Again, we don't want it to be a really thin piece of metal there. Um, we need to have some metal there so that it will cut. And those blades again are spinning really fast, and whether they're dull or sharp, they're gonna cut or beat that grass to death. So
Yeah, we should talk about how you tell if your blades are dull. So if you look at your grass and the tips are all shredded
mhm.
and stuff, that's a pretty good indication your blades aren't sharp. You should, like scissors, you should have a nice clean cut. on that grass. So if the tips look beat up, it's a pretty good chance you need to sharpen your blades.
And it does depend on your species of grass. If you are growing a zoysia grass, which not many people do, but if you are, you probably would want to sharpen your blades at least once a month, ideally, probably once a week. That zoysia grass actually brings up a lot of silica from the soil, and it makes those blades really stiff, and it will dull a mower blade within a mowing or two. And so zoysia can be really hard on blades. But otherwise, I guess in terms of like frequency, again, this is why I always say, fall service is really important. You can get your blades sharpened. Your mower will then be ready next spring. But people always ask, like, well, can I only do it once a year? Like, well, yeah, ideally, we would do it at least 2 times a year. You do it either in the spring before you start mowing or in the fall when you're done mowing. And then, like when Ken did it, in the middle of the summer when you're not mowing. Like, so 2 times a year would be better than 1 time a year, but most often it's only 1 time a year.
Or never if you don't care about your grass.
Or if you don't care about grass, never. Just, but you still have to have wheelbarrows and buckets and shovels and all things to plant your other stuff. So, yeah, yeah. If you've been zoning out on this whole mower talk, yeah, I get you. I get you. Ken, you had mentioned stabilizer in your fuel tank too. So I know a lot of people are moving over to kind of battery or electric powered um, lawn equipment. But if you do have the old fashioned combustible engine type, you it is recommended to put stabilizer in that. So I have a 5 gallon fuel tank. I measure out my stabilizer for 5 gallons, and then I will put that in there, and then go to the gas station and put the 5 gallons in there. That way, I'm not trying to guess like, oh, is this 4.5 gallons or is this three 7/8 gallons? I know at the fuel pump how much gallons I'm putting in there, and my goal is 5.
Yeah, and if you got gas in the lawnmower, weed whacker, or chipper shredder, whatever, make sure you're either putting some in there if you know how much is in there, put some of that gas that's already got the stabilizer in there and run that through.
Mm-hmm.
That way you're not
Yep.
getting moisture and stuff in your fuel and causing problems down the road.
Yeah, if you get water in there or if it oxidizes, then it can't combust and it can't run. So, or it can develop a lot of gunk in there. So we don't want that to happen.
Last on our list is organize. I'm probably the person that should be talking about this.
Right. This is it's spring and fall. That's when we organize our garage, right? Or when we're supposed to. Like, yeah, this is usually when I don't know, I have that fall fever where you're just kind of like, I want to do something because we're about to hit winter and you're going to be sitting inside for like 3 months and you're like, I want to do stuff. And so going out, organizing, if you have a garden shed, tool shed, or garage, any of that, just organizing that, cleaning that up. Um, it's pretty common for us with like some of our master gardener projects where we work really hard all season long and then we kind of put everything to bed for the winter. I go into the garden shed come early spring. There's like mice. There's like all kinds of things that have taken up residence in these places. So organize, clean things up, caulk and seal, entry points for rodents, things like that. So a lot of times they'll use our tomato string for bedding. They'll like tear it apart and bed down inside of it. So yeah, some rodents can be pretty destructive in the garden shed.
Yeah, I'm hoping that one of these weekends will completely empty out the garage. People might think we're having a garage sale. Um, Empty it out, put everything back in where it belongs,
Mhm.
reorganize so we can move around in the garage again.
Yeah. And throw away the things you don't use, right?
Those are treasures. That's the
Exactly.
that's
That's
the
what I
kid
tell my wife.
that's the kid's inheritance.
That's right. Yeah. Kids, one day this can be worth a lot of money. Yes. So yeah, organize, get things cleaned up, get things ready to sit around over the winter. That's our last thing that we have here.
And I think, if you don't have a system, come like, with like woodworking tools and stuff, or just tools, screwdrivers, all that type of stuff. People will have, pegboards where they've got outlines and stuff. So you necessarily have to go that far with your garden tools, but have a system for how you're going to store stuff and where you're going to put it. It'll make your life easier.
Yeah. Or if you're like me, you just look at those pictures of those systems online and drool and say, if only, if
Someday.
only someday. Yeah. Well, that was a lot of great information about taking care of our tools. It's the end of the growing season. It is time to clean them up, get them ready for storage for the wintertime. And so I hope these tips helped you out and get things packed up, cleaned up, ready to take a break from the garden. I mean, if you want, there's other things you can do, and then be ready for you next spring. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. Hey, Ken, thank you for editing the podcast and taking care of things while I am off away sailing the high seas. I'll miss you, but I know you got everything under control.
Thank you. And I will try my best to keep things under control and keep all my digits and stuff after I'm done sharpening and all that. So I guess let's do this again next week. Maybe not you, but
maybe not me. No, but we shall do this again next week. Someone shall, one of us, yes, or all of us, or more of us. We'll do this again next week. We're going to be talking about some creepy crawly critters. Is this our Halloween episode? It might be. So yeah, check that out next week. I can't believe spooky season is here, almost over. So I'll miss it. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. And that must have been a weird show with us doing all the hand, describing things. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, viewers, watchers, if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching. Maybe it made a bit more sense. And as always, keep on growing. All right. Well, I already said that part. Okay. Weird outro. Sorry.
it's all good.